The following presentation was made at the Opryland Hotel in Nashville, Tennessee for CALLERLAB's 16th Annual Convention, 1989.
The voice session. And for those of you who have gathered here, welcome. We set out to do a different format this year than last year because last year we had a reasonably small turnout at a voice presentation. This year I see we have a considerably larger turnout. I don't know whether that's because we changed the format or not. One of the things we suggested was that any of you that had specific voice problems and wanted to talk about them and try to work with them would be welcome. So far, only one has come to speak to me, and that person has indicated they don't want to be first. Which does present me with a bit of a problem. But we'll carry on. Let me start off with at least the fundamentals of the standard voice lecture. I realized as I was setting up for this that I first gave this talk, or its predecessor, at the first CALLERLAB convention 16 years ago in St. Louis. And in fact, the subject hasn't changed a great deal in that time. What we know about voice has, but I was fortunate in being introduced very early to one of the pioneers in voice therapy, a gentleman who understood the importance of doing things that not only made the voice work effectively, but also were healthy for it and didn't destroy it. And it was into that environment that I came to learn about voice. I got there because I had a little free time one summer and went to a Boston adult education program on singing. And after the first night, the voice teacher there took me aside and said to Mr. Mayo, I believe you really ought to find yourself a voice therapist because I think you have serious voice troubles. I was calling 6 nights a week and I did recognize that there were some notes that I had a little difficulty reaching on the high end of things. I knew I was a bass. And it turns out at the time I was trying to imitate Bill Kastner, and I don't know how many of you remember Bill Kastner, but he was some 2.5 times my size, around the waist anyway, and the resonant cavities in his voice production spaces were considerably larger than my own. He had a magnificent, resonant, deep bass voice. And I was trying desperately to imitate it, and in the process was shredding my voice. It was doing it great harm. I spent the next 4 years, an hour a week, going into a not unpleasant person to study with. She was absolutely gorgeous and also very knowledgeable and worked me very hard. What I discovered is that correcting a voice problem is not easy. We all come into the world breathing properly, but somewhere they manage to get that away from us. They say, stand up straight, pull in your stomach, and then try to talk. And you can't do that because in order to make voice properly, you need to have air. And air comes down in what we call the diaphragm. We now have lots of people around teaching natural breathing. The natural childbirth people do that. The yoga people do it. They all explain that proper breathing comes from down in the diaphragm. And to do that, you need to keep the chest fully expanded all the time, and the breathing action is down here in the collar's muscle. That's what it's for. And as a matter of fact, in the course of taking the voice therapy training that I did, I gained 2 inches around the waist without gaining any weight. I've since gained the weight, but at the time, it was indeed just a development of muscles that I had not had. It's true that one of the first things to do to maintain a healthy voice is to learn to breathe properly. There are many people who will teach it to you. One of the easiest ways to learn it is to lie on your back. And then you will find that the breathing tends, for most people, to happen naturally with diaphragm breathing. If you need to accelerate it a little bit, you can put a book on your stomach, and that you can feel the book going up and down, and that is the natural and proper way to breathe. Bob Van Antwerp had a voice coach who was quite cruel and insisted on a glass of water on the stomach. Wanted it not only up and down, but also controlled and smooth, and when you made a mistake, you got wet. But that proper breathing is the first thing to learn. The next step of the proper use of your voice is to learn to relax the facial muscles. And I spent a lot of time in that training period, massaging the muscles and making myself look absolutely foolish. She finally made me look in a mirror so that I could know exactly how foolish I looked. But you need to get relaxation in all of these muscles. You need to be able to move the jaw freely. Most of you would not be able to do that. It took literally a couple of years before I could get my jaw relaxed enough so someone else could move it. As soon as somebody grabs hold of your jaw, those muscles tighten up almost instinctively. To use your voice properly, you should have relaxation of all the muscles around the voice production mechanism. In producing sound, we need to understand a little bit about what sound is. It is vibrating air pressure. And that vibrating air pressure is produced in many ways. With a piano, you hit a hammer on a string, and the string vibrates and makes the air around it vibrate. The guitar, same thing. You pluck a string. How else do we make sound? Violins, you bow the string and make it vibrate. All of these are vibrating air pressure. In a human voice, the vocal cords do that, and the vocal cords are muscles that are down here in the larynx somewhere. They are stretched, and air passes over them, causing them to vibrate. That makes the air vibrate, and that vibrating air goes from my vocal cords out from my mouth across the airspace between you and me and makes your eardrum vibrate. It is a membrane inside your ear that goes back and forth. It physically moves. And little nerves attached to it, when it moves, say, brain, that's sound, and transmit it to the brain. When you introduce an amplifier to the process, it doesn't change very much. Inside of the microphone here, there is a diaphragm that moves in response to the vibrating air pressure of my voice. That creates an electrical signal which trots down the wire to the amplifier, which is who knows where here. But it is amplified, made bigger. Goes to a speaker. This isn't where this speaker is. It's up there somewhere. But the speaker you've all seen, it's a cone. And in fact, if the frequency of the note is low enough, it's a low pitch, you can sometimes even see the speaker move. It goes in and out, copying the movement of the vocal cords and duplicating that vibrating air pressure. That is the process of making sound. If you do that whole thing in a vacuum, you don't hear, because you need to have the air in between to vibrate in order to make your eardrum move. And so that's the process of producing sound. Pitch, the note that we sing, has to do with the number of vibrations per second, the frequency. And if we vibrate at somewhere around 250 hertz, 250 vibrations per second, that is middle C on the piano. Cut that in half and you drop down an octave. And you all know what an octave is. It's the note that sounds the same but it's lower. That's about all I can say about an octave. Technically, it's half the vibrations per second. Double the vibrations per second, you go up an octave. The other thing that's important to know about the physics of sound production is overtones. When you pluck a guitar string, the main string vibrates at, if it's middle C, about 250 vibrations per second, but sections of that string all vibrate faster, multiples of that 250. Those multiples produce higher notes, but much softer, and they're called overtones. The combination of those overtones with the primary tone are what produce the difference in quality of sound, what distinguishes a guitar sound from a piano sound. The vibrations in a piano string at middle C are different from those in a guitar string, and that's how you tell. The vibrations of the string and the air around it also make the frame of the piano vibrate, or the instrument of the guitar vibrate, and that gives it the characteristic that makes it different. In a human voice, that's what makes your voice and mine different. The shape of the cavities inside of the head and the resonant spaces in which the sound you produce vibrates give your voice its own individual characteristics. And that's why my voice is different from yours, and that's why I could not imitate Bill Kastner. Trying to, what I did was to hold in the sound and to try to make it sound right to me. One of the funny things we learn about voices is that what we hear of ourselves does not come out of our mouth and around and into the ear, not even through the speaker. There's a little bit of that coming to me, but most of what I hear of myself is internal. It's a vibration of the bone structure inside my head that makes the eardrum of my eardrum vibrate. And so the transmission of my sound to me is internal. Therefore, when I listen to myself, I don't sound to me like I sound to you. That's one of the reasons why you don't recognize yourself on a tape recorder. Because your sound to you is not what people hear. It's almost, you could say, what people didn't hear. It's what you kept inside. When you project the sound out, then it goes to the microphone and into the tape recorder, and all of your friends will tell you that the tape recording sounds like you. It's only to you that it sounds different. And that's the reason, because you're hearing a different kind of sound. In order to get the sound out, you need that air. You need to be able to move air across the vocal cords. Not only to project the sound out from your voice, from your throat, and to make it available to the microphone or to your listeners' ears, but also to keep the vocal cords, those two muscles, separated. As the air flows between them, they vibrate. If the air is not strong enough to keep them separated, they vibrate and rub together. And that produces contact ulcers or sores. It's the kind of thing you'd get if you rub anything together long enough. That's a fairly common problem for people who don't use their voice correctly and yet use it a lot. Many callers get away with using their voice incorrectly because they don't do it often enough to cause the damage. It's not at all uncommon for callers to start out doing what they've done for whatever part of their lives they've lived, and to do very successfully, calling 1 or 2 nights a week. They then begin to get good and get hired, and they're up to 4 and 5 nights a week, and the wife is angry, and the kids don't recognize them anymore, and their voice starts to have trouble. The reason is that they're increasing the incorrect use of the voice. Voice is like any other muscle. When it's properly used, it improves. And in fact, I have often gone to dances with voice problems, congestion in the throat or the nose, and by using the voice correctly have succeeded in correcting that problem. The throat will clear up and the nasal passages open up just because I get the right kind of vibration in the right places, and usually that will correct itself. One of the other asides that learning to breathe properly produced for me was an overall improvement in health. And I'm not going to lay a health trip on you because I'm not a doctor and that's not my business, but it is my experience that when I breathe properly and provide an adequate flow of air into my system, whether or not I'm using it to produce sound, I end up healthier. I don't get colds as often, my nasal passages don't stuff up as often, and overall life is better. It turns out oxygen is the fuel that runs our body, and or at least it helps to burn it, and we do better when we get an adequate supply. So much for the mechanics of voice production. That's how it's done. But we need one additional thing. All we've done so far is to produce sound. We need to turn that sound into words. It's called pronunciation or enunciation, and it involves the use of the tongue and the lips. You got to use both a lot. Most callers and most people do not use the lips sufficiently in enunciating. They feel it looks stupid. I don't think so. I did when they first tried to get me doing it. The amount of movement that I'm putting in my lips now seemed to me absolutely absurd. But it's also true that you cannot make the sounds clear and intelligible enough unless you use the tongue and the lips adequately. And that means really use them to shape the words. Don't be afraid that it looks stupid. It in fact looks proper. It's what people expect you to be doing. And it makes the difference between being able to be heard and not being able to be heard. If you take out almost any record in square dancing, particularly the LPs where patter is presented, you will find it very hard to detect a final consonant. The D on the end of Alamand, the T on the end of right or left. Those aren't there. Square dance callers don't do that. The call is right and left thu. There's no R in thu. You've got that. And there's no T on either right or left. let alone the D in the middle. Right and left through. That's the way it should be, but it almost never is. We are very sloppy about our enunciation, our diction. We don't do it anywhere near well enough. You can make a tremendous difference in the dancer's ability to hear if you will enunciate carefully. That's particularly important in that situation that we all face eventually. You get the 9 o'clock spot at the convention, and convention sound is inevitably atrocious. It's worse than almost anywhere else. And yet, some callers can be heard in that setting. Others cannot. The difference is almost certainly diction, enunciation. Stand up. You may sit down again now. I was just demonstrating for you a characteristic of voice that has nothing to do with physics. It has to do with a state of mind. When I told you to stand up, there was something about the voice, the delivery of that led you to believe that I expected action. I was no longer talking to you, I was directing you to do something. That's what square dance callers do. And it's quite different to talk to someone and to direct those people to do something. We as square dance callers need to understand that difference and to make use of it effectively. When I said to stand up, very differently than I just said it now, you heard my intent. I was confident of what I expected to happen, and that confidence came across to you. That's what we owe to dancers. We owe them a confident delivery that directs them through dancing. Interesting story, many years ago teaching a caller's school, we had a person show up who had been encouraged by his friends to come because he was a great singer. He was not a square dancer, knew absolutely nothing about square dancing, but he'd memorized a couple of singing calls, several. And first night we got everybody to stand up and call it a bit, and this gentleman stood up to call and started into a singing call with an absolutely magnificent voice. It was just gorgeous. And 3 squares of experienced dancers, all of whom callers, and we all know that myth about callers can't dance is almost not true. Some of them don't dance very well. They get through the figures, but I don't know as I'd call it dancing. Nevertheless, they knew the figures, but they were unable to dance to this gentleman. All 3 squares broke down. And he started over again. And again, all 3 squares broke down. And then I began to understand that calling is different from singing. In singing, if you're Frank Sinatra, you're selling a message. You are sending people a story. You're telling them something that you want them to understand. Some other singers don't even do that, and this was one of those. He had no idea what he was saying. He had no image of the action that he expected, and no sense of command in his voice. He was singing a song. It did not convey direction to the dancers, and they were unable to dance to it, even though they knew the choreography that he was using well. That's a very striking fact which shows up very often, particularly with callers who are memorizing. Because if you memorize words, that's very different from memorizing dance patterns and the movement of dancers. If you are memorizing words, then you are unlikely, not impossible, but very unlikely to be able to deliver them as directions to people to do something. You need to be convincing. You need to expect the action that you're directing in order to send that message properly. And that's a very important fact, particularly for memorizing. It also says something about how to learn singing calls. Memorizing the words that come with the singing call is undoubtedly the worst possible way to learn a singing call. If you're going to learn a singing call, learn the dance. Learn the dance route. First, you got to know the melody. Listen to it enough so that you know the melody very well. But don't mumble any words with it. Hum if you have to, but don't use words. The next step in learning a singing call, after you know the melody, is to know the dance action that you want to go with it. I routinely call the dance action as a patter call before I ever try to fit it to the music. I want to see it happen. I want to watch the dancers move. I want a mental picture of the action that those words are calling for. Only when I have that action clearly in mind do I then try to fit the words to the music. And then I am singing a square dance call, which is quite different from singing a song. I'm directing dancers through action. Very important distinction to keep firmly in mind. Finally, on the care and feeding of your voice, if you do not maintain an adequate flow of air out of your mouth and nose while you're producing sound, you will run the risk of doing damage to your vocal cords. You must have air flowing across. Very often, we see callers, particularly callers who are having difficulty with choreography or are just starting to learn a new choreographic technique, will start to call, and the first calls come out loud, strong, clear, and as they get going, the voice tapers off, and pretty soon it gets thin, and then they'll take in a big gulp of air and start in again, and you can hear them for a while, and then they run out of air, and it fades away because they forget to breathe. Choreography will not take the place of oxygen. You got to breathe. But it's not at all uncommon. I'm sure you've all heard it. The caller that tapers off at the end of the phrase. Almost certainly that's because of a lack of air. They forget to breathe. You don't have to hold your breath a long time. There's no time in square dancing when you need to hold it for more than 8 seconds. That's 16 beats. 8 seconds is not a long time. In order to get a sense of how the voice can go and also test this 8-second theory, I'm going to ask you all to join me in counting to 8. But I don't want you to count 1, 2, 3, 4. I want you to produce a sound that goes for 8 seconds and hang the numbers on it. 1, 2, like that we're going to go. We're going to take in air when we start, and we're going to run out of air at the end of that 8 counts. I don't want you to have any left. I'm most pleased to see some of you sitting up straight because you realize you can't make sound properly while you're slumped over and your chest is all collapsed. You got to have space for the air in there. Let's try it. All together now. We'll take in air, and I want to just hang the words on there. Ready, set, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many of you had to breathe in? Not enough. You should use that air. Don't try to hang on to it. Now, that was 8 seconds about. 16 beats of square dancing. You all had little difficulty lasting that long. You'll never have to hold your breath any longer. But you do have to use the air that you have in order to keep your voice healthy and in order to project the sound that you're making out to the people who need to hear it. Next interesting item I discovered is that sound comes not only out of the mouth, but also all of those passages inside, spaces inside the head that produce the character of your voice vibrate, and some of that sound comes out through the nose. You say, oh, isn't that nasal? Well, nasal is in fact when you shut off the flow of sound through your nose. Normally, you expect some sound to come out, and in fact, you should be able to feel air coming out of your nose as we repeat that exercise of counting to 8. You want to let's reverse that just a little bit. First of all, we're going to hum. Mouth closed. Then I want you to open the mouth, but first of all, hum with your finger up under your nose so that you can feel the air coming out of your nose as you hum. Me. Many of you will notice that when you open your mouth, the airflow out of your nose stops. Should not. Should continue. There should be a flow of air coming both through the nose and the mouth. And that leads to one of the often ignored bits of advice to callers. Many callers apparently have been told to plant the microphone on their chin and leave it there. Mistake. Today's microphones particularly, this one is fairly omnidirectional and I can get around to the side here and still be heard reasonably well. But most of the microphones that callers are using these days are directional microphones. They're designed to receive sound straight in the end. And if we put the microphone down here on the chin, we do not deliver to the microphone, particularly the sound that's coming through the nose, but we don't also give it the proper sound that it should have. Just equipment use observation here. When we take an omnidirectional microphone and plant it on our chin, we give equal access to the sound, or a directional microphone, and plant it on our chin. We're talking across the top of it, but all the crowd noise also can come across the top of that microphone and has equal access. It gets amplified back out over the speaker and makes it more difficult to understand what we're saying. Proper use of the microphone says aim it at the sound source. And so you should have the microphone pointed directly at your mouth. It should also be far enough away so that it picks up some of the nose sound and lets those two blend. Few microphones work well. Some are designed to work with the microphone right in your teeth. But most are not. Most prefer to have you back a little bit so that the microphone can get blended sound and it doesn't overload. Take that, tape. Also notice that you can control volume with the movement of the microphone. If you get carried away with your song, you can back the microphone away a little bit. Proper microphone use, you'll seldom see an entertainer outside of the square dance business with a microphone planted on the chin. That's got to tell you something. But callers planted on their chin. Why? Somebody told them that if they turned their head, the microphone would go with them. I really think we're smart enough to figure out that if we turn our head, we ought to go back and bring the microphone along. We can catch on to that pretty fast. You can hear it pretty fast. So, we have the standard lecture on voice use. This was billed as a clinic, and one of the reasons I've been going through this whole lecture, which I didn't intend to do, is so that we got time enough to get a house hookup, and I don't know whether we succeeded or not. Somebody came in and ran a wire.
Check it out.
Would you be willing to stand up and see if that makes sound over the house system?
1, 2. That's the speaker there.
You got anything coming out of the roof, John?
1, 2, 3. Hey.
It's coming out over the hall system too. Okay, fine. Then we have both systems working. We build this as a voice clinic, and let me start off by asking, do any of you have any questions on what I've just said? As I mentioned, this talk is the one I gave 16 years ago. It hasn't changed very much in between, but I've got several questions. Let me answer those, and then anyone that would like to come up and work on a particular voice problem, you're welcome, and we'll have at it. First one was way back here.
While you're enunciating, how do you reduce the whistling sound that sometimes pick up?
If you keep the microphone further away, you'll find you don't get that as often, but the whistling sound very often comes from improper use of the tongue. The tongue should mostly be relaxed in the bottom of the mouth. It should not curl up very much, and if it does, only the tip of it. Very little movement of the tongue is necessary. It should never hit further back than the gum line on the upper teeth. And if you can make it, one of the problems I had when I first started taking voice lessons was that I was making L sounds by putting the tongue way up in the roof of my mouth. And that does all kinds of bad things. But if you're using the enunciation properly and not moving the tongue very much, that lisp will go away, or the hissing sound will go away. Some thought is necessary when you're making S sounds, but you can also help the pickup of it if you'll back the microphone away so that it doesn't emphasize. If I get in here and hiss, I get a lot more hiss sound than if I back away just a little bit with a hiss. Yes?
I noticed you have water up there. What is moisturizing of your voice playing? I've heard several different techniques. What is your thought?
Yeah, the question is what about water and moisturizing of your voice? One of the problems that many entertainers have in air-conditioned facilities is that they get dry air, much too dry. Many of them have gone to all sorts of lengths to try to solve that problem. They get vaporizers on their microphone and all kinds of stuff. There's some substance to that, but mostly the answer is a very dry situation is liable to dry it up. What I do when I'm having trouble with my voice is to put my head over a sink of steaming water and breathe steam. Breathing steam is a way to deal with that. We sometimes work in those air-conditioned environments too, and they can indeed be difficult. My voice coach felt very strongly that one should not have cold liquids while using the voice strongly. Arden Hopkin, when he did this voice session for us several years ago, pointed out that really doesn't make much difference in the way it was explained originally, because in fact drinking water gets nowhere near your vocal cords, but it does deal with the rest of the muscles, and muscle relaxation in the vocal process is important. Generally, when you get muscles warmed up, you don't want to give them a cold bath. Warming them up is a useful thing to do, to get started, to breathe steam if you can, or any way that you can get at steam. When I use liquids during a dance, I drink black coffee, so that's my preference, but tea will do equally well, and if I can't get either of those, hot tap water works just dandy. But I do not drink cold liquids. I know plenty of callers who do. They get away with it. Maybe my voice has been spoiled. When I drink cold, there's at least a fair chance that I will get a voice break sometime in the next tip. Maybe my voice is just used to being treated well. But warm liquids, one thing you don't want is any milk product, because it has a tendency to coat the whole process and get a little gooey. Over here.
Where does one go to find out the proper breathing techniques and how to treat your...
Fortunately, voice therapists are much more available than they were years ago. The question is, where do you go to get voice help and voice therapy? Hospitals very often do, and note the point here that you're not looking for a singing teacher. Singing teachers very often also are voice therapists, but that's not what you're after. What you're after is someone who will deal with the health of your voice and proper use of it. And so try a voice teacher, but let her know or him know that what you're looking for is a healthy voice and how to use it in your business. You aren't out to become a pop singer or an opera singer. You want to know how to use your voice correctly, and one of the clues, if you go to a voice teacher, voice person, who does not start out by talking to you about proper breathing and relaxation, leave. Go find another one. That's how you tell. Hospitals very often have voice therapists. Universities with a drama department or a music department will also often lead you to those people. There are surprising numbers of choir leaders out in the world who are also very competent voice people. The bottom line, if they do not talk to you first about breathing and relaxation, find someone else. Yes?
Yes, most of the information that I have on voice care is... Did you want to say something?
No, I'm just thinking we need to get these questions onto the tape. And let's ask the next people that want to ask questions to use that microphone. Yeah, if you would. Well, it's really a lot better on the tapes. I don't know how many of you listen to tapes where the people did not ask the questions, but it's very frustrating to hear only the answers on the tape. But we have two mics. Let's use them.
I'm Tony McCumber from Hannibal, Missouri. I'm here because I want to try to get some first-hand information on voice preservation techniques. I have second-hand information from drama coaches and speech teachers. And you mentioned black coffee and tea. And in connection with that, the information that I have been given is that caffeine is something you should absolutely stay away from if you use your voice for a living. Do you have any other comment or information on that?
Never heard that.
So we won't clear that up.
There are lots of people who talk about caffeine as bad, but I've never heard it connected to voice. And we won't clear it up here. That's true. If you want to ask questions, why don't you just join the line at the microphone and do them in order. That's the easiest way to... We'll just...
Niels Stans from the Netherlands. I had voice problem last year, and it's not so much a question, but you said relaxation of vocal cords. And
not only vocal cords, but relaxation of the entire voice production mechanism, throat, face.
It's just what you said. It sounds silly to open up your mouth and relax, but it really has to be. And what they told me, if you do a right and left through, it makes it so much easier. And how many people are talking till the end of let's say the air, and
they run out of air. And then start rubbing vocal cords together. Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
That's what I want to say. And they told me a very nice movement. If you use the S, just take the letter S and pull your stomach in S and put it over there. And you can do it 30, 40 times without breathing. Breathing become natural. You don't inhale. You know what I mean?
You get air in without inhaling? This I gotta see.
Yes? Okay, you want to see it? You pull your stomach in
but in between each of those, he's taking in air.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it comes...
It happens naturally, and that's the point you're making, I think. Yes.
That's all I want to say.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Kathy Villa, and I'm from Newark, California, and I've only been calling for about 2 years. And I've noticed, more or less regularly, I noticed towards the end of the evening my voice starts getting raspy, and I'm wondering what am I doing that's making that happen?
Not using enough air. It needs to be breathier. We all are afraid that the sound will be breathy. In fact, all it does is project it out to the microphone and make it available. We try to hold it in, and my instant analysis, and that may not be the total thing, and I'd like to ask you to did any of you bring records? It's easier. I swiped a couple from Supreme Audio, and we have them up here, but no singing calls that anyone will recognize. But if you'd like to hang in there, and we'll try some patter calling after we get through the questions, just to see if it confirms what I've just said.
Okay, thank you.
Karen Novak, Lakeville, Minnesota. Apparently we lady callers are going to be heard one way or another today. But my question concerns yodeling. Does it have an effect on your voice overall or not?
Done properly, it's no problem. It's not damaging to the voice, provided you keep air coming. What you do, I believe, and there may be a yodeling expert here who will deny it, but I think what you do is to divide the vocal cord and go into a higher pitch by vibrating a shorter length of the vocal cord. And that is, again, as long as you are using the voice properly, meaning adequate breath, adequate air while you're producing the sound, the fact that you're yodeling is not in any way harmful to the voice.
Rich Stedman from Royal, Virginia. I have one question. I know all of us has hit the singing call that somebody has put out, and you said, that's the most wonderful thing I ever heard in my life. You buy the singing call, and you put it on, and you find on that one side that there's one note that I can't get to. And what I'd like to find out today is how can I get to that note? What can I do? I know maybe my voice doesn't reach that range, but I would like to know how to cover up or bring that down to where I can handle that note in that singing call.
They don't call me Windy Jim for nothing. My universal answer to all questions about voice is breathe. But it's not as facetious as it might sound, because, for one thing, in the course of the voice training that I took, I added about 5 notes to the upper end of my range. It turns out I'm not a bass. In fact, I'm more like a high baritone, and had a fairly good range, but I never knew how to use it. What I just heard tells me that you are not using air to support the flow of the voice out, and I would suspect that if we can get you breathing properly, that note will come available to you. What very often happens is people go after a high note by crunching the shoulders and really pushing it out. That's absolutely the opposite of what you should be doing. What you need to do to get a high note is to get the chest as high as you can, to get it as full of air as possible, and to think high. You don't do that by scrunching or pushing for it. You think high and open, and if you can make the air flow properly, then you will quite likely be able to add 1 or 2 notes. If you're only one away from it, the chances are you can make it that way. The other side of the coin is harmonize. Go to a note a third down, or the harmony note that goes with it. Very often if you do that on just one note, it stands out fairly dramatically, so you may want to harmonize the line leading up to it and through it. Another way is just to shut up. Very often those high notes are notes that you can do without. Almost all callers have a tendency to use too many words. The extra words cause trouble in 2 ways. The one that annoys me the most is the timing problems, because we know, I think, that the problems come from teaching class. We teach dancers to do a right and left through and turn them on around. And the turn them on around never goes away. It is with us till our dying day as callers. Your dancers stop needing that after the 2nd night. But we continue to use it and swing through 2 by 2. Some people tell me they do that for timing. What it most often does is interfere with their timing, and the dancers are standing waiting for the next action while we're finishing our patter line. That's one reason for not using too many words. The other reason is that we don't breathe. You need You can certainly breathe more easily if you aren't trying to fill every beat with 3 or 4 syllables. Dancers increasingly are being offered choreography so complicated that they need every possible help they can get in understanding, and cutting out all unnecessary words is the greatest help that you can give them. We add considerably to the confusion of our dancers by using unnecessary terminology. And over and over again, you'll hear the caller say, square through 3/4, stick out a hand, there's the corner. Well, I'm standing there while you're saying stick out a hand. I've got my hand out. It's been there for quite a while. I'm ready. Why don't you tell me to Alaman left? But that's timing, and that's a different subject. It also interferes with the voice. You don't take in enough air. You don't remember, you don't leave a gap to breathe in. We start out somewhere thinking that our sound is like auctioneers and we need to make continuous sound. Not true. We need to direct dancers through dance action. And very often you can just let that part of the song go. Unfortunately, they very often put it in the chorus line. If it's not in the chorus line, by all means let it go. But if it is in the chorus line, stand up straight, be sure you have an adequate amount of air as early before, as immediately before that high note as possible. Keep the chest up. You go after high notes with the muscles in the chest by thrusting them out as forcefully as you can when you go after that note. We tend to think we can squeeze the note out, and that's the opposite of the right way to approach it. Any other questions? Do we have a volunteer? I have a volunteer. You have a question. Have to be careful how you stick up your hand in this crowd. You could end up on a microphone in no time at all.
Dorothy Peeler here. What is the converse of this now? How do you punch a low note when it's so hard but you're having trouble getting any volume?
Exactly the same way. And that's the surprise. The answer is your voice needs to be supported with adequate air and adequate muscle force, regardless of the pitch of the note. One of the exercises that I use to warm up, and a subject I didn't mention there, but I do not like to start into an evening with my voice unused. And my voice coach gave me a couple of exercises to do. They are designed to let me use all of the vowel sounds and to try to maintain the same voice quality across all of the vowel sounds. And it is also, because it starts with a closed M sound, reminds me to make the sound come through my nose. And it is mi, me, ma, mo, mu. The object being to make the voice quality identical for all of those vowel sounds. And then the extension of that is to do the same thing over a range of pitches. Mi, me, ma, mo, mi, me, ma, mo, mu. Mi, me, ma, mo, mi, me, ma, mo, mu. Again, trying to maintain the same voice quality across the vowel sounds and the full range of pitch. It has never been perfect, but when I'm doing it properly, that helps me to do a better job, particularly on the first singing call. If I forget to do it, I can warm up during the first singing call, but it cuts into the impact of that. I do a more effective job if I go with my voice warmed up. Some of you heard me walking through the corridor on the way to the room here because I haven't been saying anything today. It's an unusual experience for me at CALLERLAB, but I've had nothing to say, and so I realized that I was about to start into a session with a fair amount of talking, and I had not warmed up my voice. So I did it coming across the corridor with exactly those exercises. But the answer to your question, Dorothy, is to stand up straight, get the chest fully expanded, get enough air in it, and then whether the note is low or the note is high, you get exactly the same process. You need air coming out through the vocal cords in order to support whatever pitch you're trying to sing. And it's exactly the same process for the low notes that it is for the high ones.
This ends side 1. Please turn over tape to continue.
And then to change it as we go to a higher pitch. Volume need not be lower if you provide enough air to carrying the sound out. The vocal cords are going to vibrate. The amount of air that comes and the amount of vibration in it need not be different. It is a mental state of things. One other interesting point, speaking of the mental attitude, most of the pitch problems, the callers that we hear, or even the Grand Ole Opry stars who cannot land on the right pitch. I don't know how many of you were there Saturday night, but some of them do very well. But hitting the right note is not a physical problem. In all the years that I've been working with voice at caller schools, I have only encountered one person who was tone deaf. Tone deaf means that they cannot tell me whether a note that I strike and the next note that I strike are higher or lower. If I hit one and then another, they can't tell me whether the second is a higher note or a lower note. That's a tone deaf person. There are very, very few of them. There are, however, a fair number of callers whose voice note and the record note are different. That happens not because they're tone deaf, but most often because they're not paying attention. Most pitch problems are hearing problems. They result from the caller not listening to the note that's trying to be matched. And so they inaccurately reproduce that note. You don't control the tension in your vocal cords by thinking, I'm going to tighten that muscle. You think in your head a pitch, a sound that you're going to produce, and your body instinctively sets the tension in the vocal cords properly. If you don't hear the note that you're trying to match in your mind correctly, then you don't produce it correctly. And fixing pitch problems for callers is most often a process of positioning them first so that they can hear the note that they're trying to copy, and then getting them to listen to it. They're so busy with the choreography that they forget to listen. On a singing call, they very often have memorized it, and they have this great cue card in the sky that they're reading, but they're not listening to the note they're trying to match. You must hear the note, and if you do, almost everyone can match it. There are rare exceptions. The other reason for pitch problems is an inadequate breathing. Windy Jim's solution for everything. Okay, do we have a volunteer?
Can I have another question?
Sure.
Corky Burt. Jim, I have absolutely no trouble with my voice.
I noticed that.
Patter or singer, how many times a week or a day I do it, but I've started in the last year, instead of doing skits at after parties, which I've run out of, I'm doing some singing, as you likely have no doubt heard to these various records. And I do find that I'm straining my voice. Is this probably a little tension, or what might you say?
Panic will do wonderful things for us.
I don't really feel that much panic, but yet I'm feeling that there is some there, and I'm wondering if that's tightening up.
I'm only guessing, but my guess is that those of us who call have this nice crutch that they aren't really out there listening to us, they're dancing. When we start singing, we have all these faces staring back at us, and that may produce a lack of communication, a lack of direction. You may be, in your own way, reading the great cue card in the sky, remembering the words, concentrating on other than delivering this message to the people. It's almost certainly an inadequate breathing, resulting from just not paying attention to that aspect of the delivery. My guess is that if you concentrate, assuming that you know the material well, that if you concentrate on giving it out, of delivering it across the microphone to the people, that you will go a long way toward fixing that problem.
I think that might be an answer, and I feel that the music is sometimes not as melodious. You've only got a note here and there, and it's not as easy to follow as our square dance music is.
And it also
a lot of breaks in between.
It also requires you to hold the notes longer than most square dancers do, bringing me to another problem that square dancers very often have. They don't deliver a song as if it were a song. They deliver just the command and then cut off the sound. When you're delivering, particularly the chorus line in a singing call, hold the notes the way a singer would hold the notes. Don't just drop it off. At the chorus line, you are a singer. Your directions are complete. The dancers are promenading home. They don't need any more direction from you, but they would like to hear the song go all the way to the end. Do not shortchange the song, just as you don't shortchange the commands. They both are part of a singing call.
Yeah, Jim, Pete Divin from Baltimore, Maryland. I hear these notes in my head. I can hit a lot of them, but as you can tell, I don't have a real high voice. How in the world do you get into a falsetto? I've tried it, I can hear it, but I can't get it out.
I don't think I can help you with that one. I think, however, that you will find that if you move the sound higher in your throat, further forward, and think of it up in your head rather than down in your throat, that you will find you have access to more high notes than you think you do. As I heard you there, I heard you using a lower voice than I think you need to. And I would encourage you, one of the techniques that I use for clearing my throat and my voice when I have congestion, again from my voice therapist, was to hum the highest note that I can comfortably hum. But really just work it up as high as I can make it. Very soft, not loud, not driving it, not pushing it, but it does make the sound come through the nose, makes it vibrate up in here, and that breaks loose congestion. But it also reminds me to get the sound up into the nose, and I would suggest that as a practice, just to get the feel of sound up in your nose. And you can feel the vibration right on the bridge of the nose if you are producing that sound correctly. And I don't, from what I just heard, I don't think you're doing enough of that. And that you will find that feeling familiar, more comfortable, get used to it, and try to use it in your normal voice production after you have practiced getting the right feeling. And I think you can find it. I don't know what a falsetto is. Maybe the yodelers in the world can tell us. Bill Peters thinks he's the world's greatest non-yodeler, but I just passed him up. I don't. Do I have anybody who wants to come and lay a record on me and give it a go? Good.
Bill Anderson, Staten Island. I just would like to reiterate, I don't know how many people have heard Jim call or speak, and how many say, gee, I tried it, but it doesn't work. If you tried it with the wrong voice therapist, it doesn't work.
That's true.
And a lot of times the pitch is a problem with the ear, by my voice coach. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's a good idea to have the ears checked.
Very true. Good point. And let me extend that beyond just... I have, over the years, found several people who had a hearing problem in one or the other ear and didn't realize it. Callers. And when I switched the monitor to the other side, or switched them to the other side of the speaker, the problem of pitch went away. They did not realize they couldn't hear out of the left ear. And very surprising. I've also discovered in my beginners classes a significant number of people who did not know that they had hearing problems. And they weren't dummies. They just couldn't hear. And sometimes the hearing aids are able to fix that, and they've continued on and become happy, successful dancers. But don't overlook the possibility that class member is not having trouble because they don't understand. It's just they don't hear. People are not always aware of hearing losses. Yes, it's true that certain pitches, what happens with hearing loss, they're beginning to discover these days that hearing loss isn't just the whole thing gets softer. There are, in fact, particular pitches, particular frequencies that your ear doesn't respond to. And you may hear perfectly well one person. I have a friend who doesn't hear his wife very well. But my wife, he hears fine. And his wife is not really thrilled about that. Okay, we got somebody that wants to give it a go, and go. You didn't bring a record. You want to use that one? As I say, I inherited them. I don't know where they are, and for the benefit of the tape, I'm going to stay at this microphone, even though I would normally expect to be closer there. Produce a reasonable facsimile of a patter. I have this little square of dancers that are about 6 inches high, and they dance right there in front of you. Well, if those gentlemen would just keep their feet from trampling them, it would work well. But it really does help if you can try to picture those dancers and call to them. Direct them through some action. And let me hear, and then we'll see if I can identify the problem, and if not, you can tell me what it is. Don't be afraid to adjust the knobs. Don't forget to look at my dancers. You have to stand back, you're stepping on them. There you go. Okay, tell them what to do.
Heads past the ocean, swing through 2 by 2, extend to the outside 2, swing through that way. Follow your neighbor and spread, girls trade linear cycle. Got lines up to the middle and back, pass through, wheel and deal, double pass through, track 2 you do. Girls trade linear cycle, hinge, fold, follow, peel.
Isn't it nice this way? Nobody can tell whether they're making it through or not. Take the needle off for me. Super. Take the needle off for me. As I say, I'm going to try to stay close enough to this so that the tape will get what I have to say. One of the... did that feel to you reasonably like what you normally sound like? And pretty much. Yeah, the record's a little problem. I just picked them out of the pile, seeing if I could find some that were labeled hoedowns. One observation I have is that it tends to be all sort of even monotone and not to be paying much attention to the music. It's directive. You're telling the dancers what to do, and I sense that, no problem. But I'd like to see it match the music or fit with the music a little bit more. One of the things I suspect is that you weren't hearing the music very well. Let me turn the speaker so that you can hear the music a lot better and see if that makes a difference in the sound of your delivery. Do it again.
Bow to your partner, bow to your corner, join hands, circle left, round that way. Left man, honey by the right foot round. Head past the ocean, ping pong, circulate. Extend your pink fan top, grand swing through. Recycle, box the nat, right the through. Go Dixie style, go Notion wave, boys trade, boys run, couples circulate that way, gonna bend your line. Go up to the middle and back.
Okay,
Still monotone?
No, I noticed a change that you are. Lift the needle for me, please. I really have trouble. What I need is an 8-foot arm here. Well, actually, about 10 feet. But that's more musical, and it does stay with the rhythm of the music. You tended to talk through the music before, and this time I had the sense that you weren't doing that quite as much. That, in fact, you were staying closer to the music. I think it would be very helpful for you to concentrate on hearing your accompaniment. Many callers these days, it's not your problem. You set a level that's reasonable, but you weren't listening. But many callers just turn down the music so that it's hardly there. Fine, but I think that kind of cuts into the feeling of dancing. And I sense, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I sense that the second time through you were fitting your call to the music rather than charging through the music. I would still like to see it more directional. It's sort of even. It's flat. You're telling them what to do, but it's all the same. You don't seem very excited about it. I realize it's hard to get excited over dancers that high, but... That's a thought. Let's try that. Can we tear the chairs apart, just move the chairs back and get a square? We got enough folks that are willing to dance here. The carpets are possible. Uncomfortable, but possible. Yeah, just open up, maybe right over in the corner there. Just nip it off the corner and let her work that way with a speaker right in back of her. Now I need a square. Thank you, Ginny. Nice idea. Can I get 4 couples?
I'll be excellent. You might want to dance with me? I'll be a girl, boy,
Okay, now tell them what to do. Heads have their back to us. Yes.
Heads past the ocean.
Tell them.
Ping pong circulate. Extend your ping swing through 2 by 2. Boys run around, girls couples circulate. Gonna bend your line up to the middle and back past the ocean.
Oh, don't just mumble. Tell them what to do. You were repeating words there, not directing dancers.
I'm not sure what you mean by directing.
You started out very well. You started out very well directing the dancers, and then you got into the pattern, and it sort of settled back into just a series of words that were going along, not really directing them. Think of more authoritative, more directive. Think of, I'm in charge here. I got to tell these folks what to do. I don't care whether the choreography works. We're not trying to resolve here. All that's out of the issue. The only thing we're talking about is voice. But tell them what to do.
Boys trade, boys run around girls. Bend your line, go up to the middle and back past the ocean. All 8 circulate. Linear cycle, go up to the middle and back, pass through. Wheel and deal, double pass through. Track 2. Girls trade, girls run, tag your line all the way through. Face in, pass through, wheel and deal, center single circle to an ocean wave.
Good. You hear a difference? Do you feel the difference? Can you duplicate it? What happens to us is, yes, you feel it here, but then you get at home and you've already called 3 tips and you're trying to work out what am I going to call next. I called that last time. I got to get something new, and your mind gets focused elsewhere. You stop paying attention to, these are my people and I got to sell this program to them, and that's where the excitement is. Oh, wow, let's go. And you start worrying about your problem. Your problem has got to be solved in the back of your head. Up front, you got to be enthusiastic. You've got to sell them. You got to convince them that you're in charge here. You tell them what to, happily, of course. I mean, we're going to have fun on this trip, but you detected my tone of voice, yes. But concentrate on delivering excitement. Not just once in a while. One of the things that marks the fundamental difference between the ordinary, the routine, competent caller, of which we have hundreds, thousands, and the few who are outstanding, exciting performers, is the ability to put effort into their delivery, to put effort into their performance, to somehow come off the stage tired. Too many of us come off the stage, that was a nice night, let's go home now. If you're doing the job that you want to do, to be a superstar, you should come off that stage tired. You should have expended effort. It's the hardest thing I know to teach. I don't know any way to say it other than that. And it's going to be your own method. It's going to be your technique. But you got to work. And the work is put into selling it to them, making it exciting for them. One more time and really push it. I don't know where they are. It's your problem.
Ping pong circulate. Extend your ping, swing through 2 by 2. Spin the top. Boys move up, right and left through. Go Dixie style to an ocean wave. Boys trade, boys run, couples circulate. Gonna bend your line, go up to the middle and back, pass through. Wheel, wheel and deal. Centers pass through, star through, go up to the back.
Partner trade.
Go up to the middle and back.
Okay, that's the excitement that I want. But right there in the middle, you started to drift away from the music. And when you start to think of what you're going to do next, you stop listening.
Right.
And you got to do both of those things. The message there is, great Scott, are we running out of time? They're invading us. We got 20 minutes. They don't have to wait. But the message to this is that in order to do a proper job vocally, you must be thoroughly familiar with your material. If you're still trying to figure out how to get them back to their corner, and that's occupying half of your attention, then you will never do the vocal job right. You can only do the vocal job right when you're dealing with things that are really familiar. Roger. Thank you.
You want me to get on that?
Yeah. Good job of calling it. And when you aren't distracted by those corners and trying to make the choreography work, the voice comes on strong. It's really very convincing.
Roger Carrigan, Keene, New Hampshire. I have a tendency, in order to generate excitement, as you're pointing out, I have a tendency to grate my voice and yell down, this kind of thing. How can I get away with this and still not destroy my voice? Because I find at the end of an evening, if I use that an awful lot, I'll come off that stage and I have to rest the voice until the next night that I call a lot.
That's not good for your voice because it is, in fact, just not using enough air. It's growling the sound and it rubs the vocal cords and doesn't provide the protection that they need. And you can't do it all night long.
Is there any gimmick that I can use to replace that?
Sure, intensity.
I'm sorry.
Intensity. You can whisper with incredible intensity and get the message across. You don't have to growl at people to get intensity in your voice. You can also smile, because the smile on your face will come through your voice. There are all kinds of gimmicks that will reflect in your voice that don't have to do it harm. One of the things that will emphasize, will focus attention on the sound easily is exaggerated enunciation. If you really work at enunciating each sound exactly, precisely, with the greatest possible exaggeration, that will focus attention on it. You can also vary from soft to a much more intense voice. None of this has to do with loudness. It has to do with intensity. And again, back to that same thing I was saying, the difference between the really superstar and the ordinary is intensity. Some way to make it exciting. And it doesn't have to be loud, and particularly don't do things that shred your voice, because they will shred your voice. And you'll be done. Okay. What are you going to do for us?
Jim Markham, Central Kentucky. Jim, I have a very thin voice, and I'd like to know some techniques to make the voice fuller. And if you can give me any suggestions, I'll do a little something here and see if you can tell me what... We'll bow to the partner, corners all, circle to the left, go round the hall, circle to the left, go round the ring. Walk all around the left-hand lady, seesaw the pretty little doll. Do an elemental up with the corner girl.
Okay, tell you what. Put down the microphone. Stand back a couple of yards there, and I'm going to put on the music, and you're going to call to me so that I can hear it without the microphone.
Walk in and out around that ring, take a little walk in. We'll promenade to go around the town, the big one up and a little one down, to get along home, you know. Swing that honey round and around, and we'll 1 and 3, square through, 4 hands around, 4 hands around in the middle of the ring, count 'em 4 all the way.
That's work. Hard work. You just found a way to put effort into calling. Making good vocal sound is not easy. The Department of Labor did a study several years ago, many years ago. They were looking for what jobs are the most physically demanding. And to nobody's surprise, the one that came out on top was coal mining. But everybody got surprised by the second one, which was opera singer. Amount of physical effort expended per unit of time. Proper voice production is not easy. We've all been doing it all our life, making sounds, but not a performance and delivery of an adequate voice sound. That's hard work. It doesn't happen just sort of laying there. You got to put effort into it. And as soon as you did, you heard the difference. You could feel the difference, right? But it's work. Hard work.
That's right.
Good. Who's next? Yeah. Why not?
Similar type of a thing.
New record. Yeah. I got offered a couple more over here too if we want to try.
I'm Glenn Dickey from California.
That's a big place.
All of these chains across the
Nice guy. Bill Addison. He's walking around here somewhere. He's not in the room, is he?
What one do we have on?
You got a patter?
It's feeling good in Wisconsin.
It's a challenge to do this in public with a record you've never heard before.
We'll bow to the partner. Yeah, I think so. Hey, you join hands, circle to the left, go up and round the ring and now. Walk around that corner, turn a partner by the left, do don't pass so, her by the left, and a corner by the right. Partner left, make another man bar. Hit him in swinging to the middle and the back of star. Hey, you shoot that star with a full turn around, rock to the partner, pull him on by.
Open your mouth. Use those lips.
Left, right, left to go, hand over hand, and I made a little harmony. Promenade, go 2 by 2, take a little walk, and one of you two head 2 couples. Rock it to the middle, and I come on back. Square through, and I get about 4 hands around.
Okay, what's the concern?
Well, the voice gets tight by the end of the evening.
You aren't opening your mouth very much. You keep the lips very closely pursed together and don't let the sound come out very much. You also aren't using a lot of air. You hear the difference when if I pull it in tight here and I keep the voice back in my throat and I don't let the air flow out, then you can hear the thinness of the sound. As soon as I open my mouth and let the air come out, you hear a difference. Let's try that count for me into the microphone. 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, now I want to hear you do that with an even more open mouth and more air. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a very different voice. Can you call with that voice? Try it. Open the mouth.
Square through and 8 me 4 lines around to go and now.
Air.
Do it side to it outside too.
Keep it
Make an ocean wave. Now you swing through 2 by 2, boy. Run around that girl. Couple circulate 1 time.
Yes.
Hey, now
right.
you
That
get a
much.
wheeling deal. Bring
More.
one around you do.
Open.
Pass through and trade by hand. Left down,
Open the mouth.
left down, right or left friend.
Right and left friend.
Right and
Use
left
the lips. Right and left. No air. I'm not hearing any air.
Around you do.
Did you hear that?
2 by 4.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that difference? That's what happens when you let air come out. Right up until that point, you had not let any flow of air come out. Now, I want that all the way through.
Yeah, can I train myself to do that just by being conscious of it?
No.
Or do I need somebody to...
You have to work at it.
Yeah, but I mean, do I need somebody to tell me to do it or tell me how
Certainly
to do
it's a lot easier if you get somebody to work with you. You can do it with a tape recorder, do it in front of a mirror so that you're sure that you got the lips opening up, but you have to train yourself to recognize that sound difference, and just those 2 notes aren't going to do it. I want to hear a supported sound. Stand up straight, get your chest out, take in all the air you can take in. Come on.
4 ladies chain, go, chain them on around and then. Join your hands, circle left, go, up and round the ring, go and all the way and then.
You just shut it off. Keep it coming.
Say square through 4 hands around and then. Take a little walk around to go and now do it side to side do and make an ocean wave.
Feel the difference?
Swing through 2 by 2
Keep it
and now
coming.
you spin
Don't shut it
your
off on
top
me.
board
More.
up and right left through, turn the girl around
More.
you do.
Air. Yeah. Right. Come on, one more try.
Sides. Let's try the sides. Beat to the right and circle up.
That's the sound I want.
Break out and I make 2 lines. Go up to the middle and I come right back. And to the right or left, do turn a girl in there. Square through and I get me 3/4 rounds. Go and now you trade 5.
Okay, you can do it. You feel the difference? But it's not easy. You also get lightheaded because you aren't used to having that much oxygen in your system. That's what happens when you don't breathe adequately. And that's the clearest indication that you have not been using enough air before. Practice breathing, particularly, down on the floor. Don't use the glass of water. That's trouble. But a book on the floor. If there wasn't such a public scene, I would put you on the floor to call on your back. Try it. Open it. No, but at home.
Will that get...
Lie on the floor, put the book on your stomach to remind you to take in air, and try calling, and you will be astounded at the difference in your voice. And that's what you need to be like when you're standing up.
That will cause my voice to be less tired?
Yes.
And not worse the next one?
You will be tired, but your voice won't be. You'll be all worn out, but your voice will be happy as a lark and ready to keep going. Okay. Who's next? It's your record.
Yeah, that's my record. I think I know it.
You're lucky you're the only one here that...
But I use the other side. Well, bound to the partner, and the corners all circle to the left, go round you do, and circle to the left, go round a ring, and do an element on the left, come back to the right on left grand, hand over hand around you go, and you meet a little girl and promenade, go walking.
Back off on you, so they stop yelling at you.
Did you hear it?
Back off.
As soon as I stopped yelling at him, he backs off. 2 steps back so you don't... No, take the mic with you. Now, like you meant it.
Like I meant it?
Like you meant it. Like you were telling me to do something.
Go away.
You're not the first.
Hey, bound to the partner, and the corners too, circle to the left, go round you do. Do an element on left, come back to the right on left grand. When you meet a little girl, promenade, that girl around you go.
Promenade, this girl around. Promenade. Big, full, deliver the whole word so we can all hear it. Full sound. Don't chop them off like that. You're cutting the words. Yeah. Full sound. Open the mouth.
It's square through and I get you 4.
4.
Do side up, swing through.
Good.
Boys run around the girl, bend your line.
Tell me. Tell me, like you meant it.
Bend the line, move up to the middle and back, and do the right on left two and turn the girl. Pass through, bend the line, move up to the middle and back, square through and get me 4.
Back the microphone away a little. Good. Keep it there. Go.
Got where I was at now. Never mind.
Who cares? We don't care whether... Nobody's checking choreography.
Good.
Back the microphone away. Talk to it. Out here somewhere.
Yes, move up to the middle and back. Do the right and left through.
Right and left through. I didn't see your lips move on right and left through.
It's the mic's in front of me.
Right and left through. Say it.
Right and left through.
No. Right and left through.
Right and left through.
That's better.
Right and left through.
Good.
Swing through. Spin the top.
Keep the volume all the way out to the end. You know, it's not swing through, spin the top, swing through. You're singing that word all the way out. It's a full word. It gets the full sound all the way out to the end. It's not swing through. Don't put the microphone down. Carry the sounds all the way out to the end. Okay, I'm dancing. You're calling.
Yes, move up in the middle and back. Do the right and left through. Squares are 2. Do an element on left. Right on left through. Whatever.
I mean, we weren't paying attention to choreography, but we don't do an element left after a 2-hand square through. No, it wouldn't do it. Okay. The point is that you need to keep that voice full all the way through. You were clipping the sounds. You're chopping each word. It's a line, and you're hanging the words on, same as we did with the numbers. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, head 2, couples, right and left through. It's a singing sound, and you're hanging those words on it. You don't need to right and left through. It's not a chop, 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 chop. Make it a sing. Deliver the song, deliver the directions with a continuous sound, not a clipped. Some, pass through are short words, but you want to carry the song through. Dorothy. That's right. We didn't get his name on the tape. It's Richard Stedman. From where? Stedman from Front Royal, Virginia. Okay, any other questions?